What breaks a fortress? The wall or the men behind it? Harrow's Gate was not merely a fortress. It was the single navigable pass through the Vaeltharion range, a stone corridor 300 feet wide, flanked by unclimbable ridgelines. Whoever held it controlled the north. The gate's designers understood attrition: 3 concentric walls, each higher than the last, murder holes above every approach. A single portcullis of iron-bound ashwood that took 40 men to raise. It was built to outlast armies. Our primary source is the chronicler Salmond of the Ashquill, who spent 11 years collecting first-hand accounts from survivors on both sides. His archive, the Harrow Testimonies, holds over 200 individual soldier reports. The Vale Dominion arrived in the 32nd year of the Ashen Compact, with a force Salmond estimates at 18,000 engineers, siege crews, and heavy infantry. Their commander, Marshal Drevath, had taken 4 fortresses in the prior campaign season. Inside the walls, the Thornwatch garrison numbered fewer than 2,000. Professional soldiers, not conscripts. Their commander, Warden Aelric, had held the gate through 2 prior incursions. He knew its rhythms the way a sailor knows a tide. Drevath's strategy was classical and brutal. Encircle completely, cut every supply line, starve the garrison into surrender before risking a direct assault. Salmond's records show the Dominion sealed the pass within 4 days, stationing cavalry pickets at every secondary trail through the Vaeltharion. Aelric sent 3 courier riders north on day 2. None returned. The gate was blind to the outside world from that point forward. Aelric's garrison had provisioned for 60 days of siege. Salmond found the original inventory ledger: salted meat, dried grain, 3 cisterns of water. Enough if rationing held. But 60 days assumes the enemy is patient. Drevath was not. On the 11th day, Drevath abandoned patience. 6 trebuchets opened fire simultaneously at dawn. This was not an assault, it was psychological warfare. The stones weren't aimed at walls, they were aimed at the inner courtyard where soldiers slept. Salmond's testimonies from Thornwatch survivors described the first bombardment in visceral, consistent terms. Stone impacts that shook the bedrock, men who'd fought for years admitting they pressed themselves flat against the inner walls and didn't move for hours. But here is where the defenders' engineering paid off. The gate's 3rd wall stood 60 feet above the valley floor. Aelric's artillery crews, firing downhill, had nearly double the effective range of Drevath's trebuchets. They destroyed 2 siege engines on day 12. Drevath pulled his remaining trebuchets back beyond counter range. Tactically sound, strategically costly. Slower bombardment meant slower psychological pressure. And every day the siege extended, his supply lines stretched thinner across hostile terrain. Salmond's logistics records showed Dominion supply wagons were traveling an additional 9 miles per round trip after the repositioning. 9 miles of Vaeltharion Mountain Road in early winter, losing axles and draft animals at a rate Drevath's quartermaster flagged in writing on day 16. The trebuchets were safer, the army was not. On day 23, Salmond's records document a decision that nearly ended the siege in one stroke. Dominion engineers began tunneling beneath the outer wall's eastern foundation, a sapping operation designed to collapse the wall from below. The method was established: dig a wide gallery beneath the foundation, prop it with timber, pack the gallery with combustibles, burn the props away. Without its foundation, the wall section above drops. Drevath had used the same method at the fortress of Caldenmere just 14 months earlier. The Thornwatch detected it through a technique Salmond describes with evident admiration. Soldiers placed clay bowls of water at intervals along the base of the outer wall, specifically at the eastern foundation, where the ground was hardest and vibrations traveled furthest through the stone. tunneling rippled the surface. Solomon traces the method to an older Thornwatch field manual, predating the siege by at least 40 years. Ancient technique, devastatingly effective. Aelric ordered a counter-tunnel dug at an angle to intercept the Dominion shaft. When the two tunnels connected on day 27, the garrison diverted cistern water directly into the Dominion excavation. The tunnel collapsed. 11 Dominion engineers were lost underground. But consider what Solmund reveals next. It reframes everything. By day 30, Drevoth's own army was hungry. The Vaelthmore terrain had shredded his supply wagons. His engineers were dead, and winter was arriving 3 weeks ahead of the seasonal average. Inside the gate, the picture was equally grim. Solmund's testimonies mark the 35th day as the breaking point for morale. Rations had been cut twice. A fever had moved through the lower barracks. 6 soldiers had died, not in combat, but in their beds. On day 38, Drevoth made the decision Aelric had been anticipating and dreading in equal measure. A full frontal assault, scaling ladders and battering rams against the outer gate. He committed 4,000 infantry. It was desperation, dressed as aggression. The outer wall's murder holes proved decisive. Solmund's garrison testimonies described coordinated arrow volleys and cascades of boiling pitch through the ceiling apertures. The assault column, compressed in the narrow entry corridor, had nowhere to retreat and nowhere to shelter. The assault broke within 2 hours. Dominion forces withdrew, leaving over 800 dead in the approach corridor and on the scaling platforms. The single bloodiest morning of the entire siege. Drevoth's army had not breached the first wall. And then, a detail Solmund flags with visible satisfaction. Drevoth tried the tunnel gambit again on day 41. The clay water bowls caught it within 6 hours. The same technique, the same result. Aelric flooded the shaft before it reached the foundation. By day 45, Solmund's Dominion-side testimonies document something Drevoth never officially reported. Desertion. Soldiers slipping into the Vaelthmore passes at night. Not dozens, hundreds. Cold, hungry men calculating their odds and choosing the mountain. Solmund records that Drevoth's own camp prefect submitted a written count of 431 missing personnel between day 43 and day 48. A figure Drevoth struck from the official campaign record, but that survived in a duplicate ledger the prefect kept separately. The army was dissolving from within, while its commander refused to acknowledge it on paper. Inside the gate, the garrison noticed. Solmund records a Thornwatch sergeant's account. Fewer campfires visible from the battlements each night. The sound of an army slowly dissolving. Aelric told his soldiers nothing. He simply pointed at the horizon and let them count the fires themselves. Here's the insight Solmund builds toward across 200 testimonies. Harrow's gate didn't hold because of superior stone or superior numbers. It held because Aelric's garrison possessed better information about the terrain, about the tunnels, about the enemy's dwindling resolve. Solmund doesn't treat the water bowl technique as improvisation. He traces it explicitly to the Thornwatch Field Compendium, a garrison manual last revised in the 48th year of the prior compact, roughly 80 years before the siege. The compendium specifies bowl placement intervals of no more than 20 feet along any wall section adjacent to soft ground. Aelric's soldiers followed those intervals precisely. What's striking is not that the technique worked, it was designed to work. What's striking is that Aelric's garrison was disciplined enough to maintain the monitoring rotation continuously through 41 days of bombardment, illness, and reduced rations. On day 51, Drevoth ordered withdrawal, not a tactical retreat, a full abandonment of the siege. His army departed the Vaelthmore in 3 columns, harassed by cold and hunger every mile south. Harrow's gate had not fallen. It had outlasted an army twice its size. Solmund's final accounting is unflinching. The Dominion lost over 3,000 dead, the majority not in combat, but to cold, illness, and the failed tunnel collapse. The Thorn Watch lost 212. Every single one is named individually in the Harrow testimonies. The Dominion testimonies are the most haunting part of Salmon's archive. One account stands apart. A Dominion crossbowman identified only as Vareth of the 3rd Encirclement Column describes the exact moment his belief in the campaign collapsed. The morning of day 39, the day after the failed assault, when he was ordered to carry 800 dead to a mass burial site in frozen ground and was given no tools adequate to dig it. Salmond quotes him directly, "We buried them in snow and called it Earth." That sentence appears in the archive without further commentary. Salmond understood it needed none. Harrow's Gate reshaped Vaeltharion's military doctrine for the generation that followed. The clearest evidence is the fortress of Drenwall, constructed 11 years after the siege under master builder Corvath of the Northern Works. Corvath's original plans, preserved in the Vaeltharion military archive, include dedicated vibration monitoring alcoves built into the foundation at 20-foot intervals along every wall section adjacent to soft ground. The specifications cite the Harrow testimonies by name. The clay bowl had become codified military architecture. The deeper lesson Solmund draws is about the limits of overwhelming force. 18,000 soldiers couldn't take a gate held by 2,000. The reason is specific. Dreveth's campaign plan assumed a 60-day supply window and a garrison that would crack under psychological pressure. Both assumptions were wrong, and he had no mechanism to discover that until it was too late. After the siege, the Vale Dominion's own military council issued a formal revision to its siege doctrine, the Kaldemir Protocols, named for Dreveth's earlier success, requiring independent supply assessments and garrison morale intelligence before any encirclement order could be authorized. The defeat at Harrow's Gate had made institutional what Dreveth had treated as optional. Salmond ends his archive not with a verdict, but with a question he couldn't resolve. If Dreveth had waited one more week, would the fever inside the gate have done what his trebuchets could not? The testimonies don't answer that, but the commanders who came after Dreveth read Salmond's work. The next Dominion siege operation, against the fortress of Varenhold 7 years later, lasted 93 days, used no frontal assault, and succeeded. Its commander, General Thessaly, kept a personal copy of the Harrow testimonies annotated in her own hand. Patience, it turned out, was a learnable doctrine. Return to the question that opened this account. What breaks a fortress, the wall or the men behind it? Solmund's answer, earned across 11 years of testimony, is neither. What breaks a fortress is the moment its defenders stop believing it can hold. Harrow's Gate never reached that moment, and the commanders who studied why, Thessaly foremost among them, built that lesson into every subsequent campaign. Know your enemy's supply line as well as your own, and never begin an encirclement you cannot outlast. That's not a lesson from legend. It's a lesson from 200 named soldiers who lived it.